Om. 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 नमः सर्वेभ्यः। ध्येयमन्त्रेण कार्यक्रमस्य आरम्भं कुर्मः। पठामि संस्कृतं नित्यं, वदामि संस्कृतं सदा, ध्यायामि संस्कृतं सम्यक्, वन्दे संस्कृतमातरम्। संस्कृतस्य प्रसाराय नैजं सर्वं ददाम्यहम्। संस्कृतस्य सदा भक्तो वन्दे संस्कृतमातरम्। संस्कृतस्य कृते जीवन्, संस्कृतस्य कृते यजन्, आत्मानमाहुतं मन्ये वन्दे संस्कृतमातरम्। हिन्दुधर्मं समाजं च पवित्रां संस्कृतिं तथा संरक्षणनुकुर्याम विश्वं शान्तिसमन्वितम्। दीपावली पर्वकालस्य शुभाशयाः। हिन्दुपरम्परा कार्यक्रमं प्रति सर्वेषां हार्दं स्वागतम्। मम नाम स्वातिः। यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ इलिनॉय इत्यत्र पठामि। संस्कृतभारत्याः युवविभागस्य कार्यकर्त्री अस्मि। अक्टोबर् मासः हिन्दुपरम्परा मासः। तन्निमित्तीकृत्य अयं कार्यक्रमः संस्कृतभारत्या प्रतिदिनम् आयोज्यमानः अस्ति। Today's topic is kind of unique. We call it yuva-paramparaa. Youth, young people in general, have contributed enormously towards preserving our culture and heritage. Chandraguptaha, Adi Shankaraha, Mirabai, Swami Vivekananda, or Bhagat Singh, and others in the modern times, just to name a few famous people who have contributed tremendously when they were young. To highlight it, we have named today's session as yuva-paramparaa. Two young people will be presenting today. Adau tayoho parichayaha bhavati.
धन्यवादः स्वाति भगिनी। नमः सर्वेभ्यः। मम नाम कार्तिक नारायणः, युवविभागस्य कार्यकर्ता। यथा स्वातिः उक्तवती, अद्यतनं प्रदर्शनं युवजनद्वयेन क्रियते। तयोः अन्यतरः अस्ति चिन्मयः सुर्पुरः। चिन्मयः योगभारत्याः कार्यकर्ता, संशोधनविभागस्य निर्देशकश्च। सेब्रूक् विश्वविद्यालये चिकित्सात्मकमनश्शास्त्रे PhD कुर्वन् अस्ति। ओक्लैंड शाला समूहे मनश्शास्त्रविषये इंटर्न् अस्ति। आधुनिकचिकित्सा व्यवस्थायां योगचिकित्सा अपि भवितुमर्हति इति दर्शयितुम् इच्छति चिन्मयः। तल्लक्ष्यं सः अविलम्बेन साधयतु इति आशास्महे। अद्यतने हिन्दुपरम्परा निरूपणे चिन्मयः योगा द साइंस एंड रिसर्च इत्येतं विषयम् अधिकृत्य कथयति। नमस्ते चिन्मय, हिन्दुपरम्परा कार्यक्रमं प्रति स्वागतम्।
Yoga is a buzzword today. Every country, big or small, is accepting yoga as part of their health regimen, and even going to the extent of including it in their education program. This is because yoga has been researched since 1924, when Swami Kuvalayananda first started the research center in Kaivalyadhama Health and Yoga Research Center at Lonavala in Maharashtra, India. Swami Vivekananda gave a clarion call for combining the best of the East, traditional and classical yoga, with the best of the West, the research methodologies and scientific analysis in 1893. This gave rise to many traditional knowledge systems being interpreted and researched to make them compatible and relevant to modern societies. Swami Vivekananda Yoga Research Foundation, SVYASA, was one of such organizations born with this vision. For the last 40 years, Svyasa University in Bangalore has produced more than 500 research papers on the efficacy of yoga. That was followed by many universities and research institutes all over the world taking up research on yoga. In this talk, we will showcase some of the techniques of yoga and their scientific background, as well as give an overview of the research landscape of yoga. Let's take a simple technique of forced nostril breathing called Kapalabhati. This breathing has become popular with many modern yogis like Baba Ramdev, emphasizing the practice. The literal meaning of the term Kapalabhati in Sanskrit is skull-shining breathing. This is a practice of forceful exhalation and passive inhalation done in quick succession. Anywhere from 60 breaths per minute to 120 breaths per minute, followed by a deep silence for a minute or two, and sometimes, as an advanced practice, the internal retention of breath can also be practiced. As yoga always states, all of this is done in a controlled manner without overdoing or overexerting oneself. So how do we achieve this skull shining? What does that mean? There are multiple aspects to this. One, at the physiological level, when forced exhalation is done, the sinus cavities are cleansed as well as strengthened. At the same time, forced exhalation is only possible with the effort coming from the diaphragm and abdominal muscles. With regular practice, all these muscles become strong and vital. Two, at the neurological level, it helps to push our boundaries for tolerating the elevated levels of oxygen in the bloodstream, followed by elevated levels of carbon dioxide when the breath is held. Also, when the breath slows down after the fast breathing, it increases the parasympathetic response in the body, a state of rest and restore. Three, at the psychological level, when one practices mild hyperventilation followed by a period of slow breathing or the cessation of breath, it trains the mind to go into a deep silence. This explanation goes to show what our ancient yogis did have applications in different faculties of physiology and psychology. While the goal of yoga is much deeper than just achieving physical and mental health, one should also understand that yoga is a system of establishing complete health at all levels. One cannot reach higher states of consciousness without complete health. Let us come to the research landscape. We will be covering just a few papers to show how much work is going on in the field of yoga research. Let us discuss one simple research question and how yoga's simple practice contributes to well-being. This practice is called low-pitch humming and nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is produced in the paranasal sinuses and carried into the lungs during nasal breathing. Nitric oxide is known to be a broadly antifungal, antiviral, and antibacterial compound. Nitric oxide is a bronchodilator, helping open nasal passages, bronchi, and bronchioles in the lungs. Nitric oxide is also a vasodilator, playing an important role in the dilation of blood vessels so that oxygen can be properly distributed throughout the body. Gentle nasal breathing optimizes nitric oxide levels in airways and blood. Now coming to yoga practice of low-pitch humming, which is a modified version of Brahmari, it creates a nasal resistance leading to a 15 to 20-fold increase in nitric oxide levels, as shown by Weitzberg-Lundberg. In a study done by Dr. Nagaratna and team at Svyasa, a paper published in September 2012 in the International Journal of Diabetes in Developing Countries showed the efficacy of yoga on patients with type 2 diabetes. In this prospective two-armed interventional randomized control study, 277 type 2 diabetics of both genders aged above 28 years who satisfied the study criteria were recruited from 5 zones in and around Bengaluru, India. They were allocated to a yoga-based lifestyle modification program or exercise-based lifestyle modification program. Integrated yoga special technique for diabetes, including yoga asanas, pranayama, meditation, and lectures on yogic lifestyle were implemented. The control interventions included physical exercises and lifestyle education. Blood glucose, HbA1c, and lipid profile were assessed at baseline and after 9 months. The results were quite encouraging. There was a reduction in medications needed for the patients in the yoga group compared to the control group. Fasting blood sugar reduced only in the yoga group. Good cholesterol also improved, and there were significant reductions within groups in PPBG, in HbA1c, triglycerides, VLDL, and total cholesterol. Thus, yoga-based lifestyle modification program is a similar program to an exercise-based lifestyle modification in reducing blood glucose, HbA1c, triglycerides, total cholesterol, and VLDL. This study shows that yoga is better than exercise in decreasing oral hypoglycemic medication requirement and LDL levels, as well as in increasing HDL in type 2 diabetics. Healthcare systems are burdened with the cost of treatments owing to chronic ailments that are on the rise. Children as young as 10 are going to clinics with chronic pain, and many children are prescribed opioids due to the severity of their pain. Diabetes and hypertension are on the rise, adding a burden to societies. Yoga is the need of the hour, and nowadays even doctors are turning to yoga for help. This is a good sign, but more concerted efforts are needed for yoga to become one of the main healing modalities in hospitals and rehabilitation centers. We hope more budget is spent on yoga as a therapy modality and also more on research within yoga. It is here that we would like to acknowledge the Indian government in making yoga even more popular and mainstream by bringing the International Day of Yoga and through various policies of bringing yoga into healthcare and education. We hope that the rest of the world follows this process. Thank you.
Namaste, Dhanyavadaha, Samskrita Bharati, for providing Yoga Bharati an opportunity to present 4-part series on yoga and its applications. Yoga Bharati is a non-profit organization with an aim of spreading holistic, authentic yoga as applicable to the Western and the modern audience. We have yoga classes for various different groups, such as adults, women, prenatal, postnatal, yoga for seniors, and also yoga for chronic ailments, ranging from back pain to cancer to neurological ailments and every kind of chronic diseases and conditions. We also have yoga courses, yoga teacher training, advanced yoga teacher training, short certification courses, and also diploma in yoga therapy. We are affiliated to Swami Vivekananda Yoga Research Foundation at Yes Vyasa in Bangalore, India. This is a premier yoga university and also has publishes research papers. It's a research institution as well, with a branch of yoga university called Vayu in the USA as well. Please do visit us at yogabharati.org for further details. Thank you.
उत्तमं चिन्मय अमेरिका देशे योग विषये संशोधनकार्यं प्रवर्तते इति ज्ञात्वा सन्तोषः जातः। योगः चिकित्सार्थकम् अपि भवितुम् अर्हति इति संशोधनेन दर्शयामः चेत् उत्तमं भवति। निरूपणार्थं धन्यवादः। अद्यतनविषयः अस्ति योगा फॉर थेरेपी एंड डांस फॉर कनेक्शन। नृत्येन कथम् अस्माकं परम्परया सह युक्ताः भवामः इति निरूपयति मोनिका देवराजु। चिन्मय इव मोनिका अपि अमेरिका देशे प्रवृद्धा। अधुना यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ वाशिंगटन इत्यत्र वैद्यशास्त्रं पठति। मोनिका बाल्यकालादेव कलाक्षेत्र पद्धतो नृत्याभ्यासं कर्तुम् आरब्धवती। शीघ्रमेव रङ्गप्रवेशम् अपि समापितवती। संस्कृति विषये परम्परा विषये च अवगन्तुं भरतनाट्यं कथम् उपकरोति इति अद्य मोनिका विशदीकरोति। नमस्ते मोनिके, कार्यक्रमं प्रति स्वागतम्।
Namaste. My name is Monica Devaraju, and I am a 4th-year medical student at the University of Washington in Seattle. I was born in India, but brought up primarily in the United States, where I've done most of my schooling. And I'm very happy to be here today to talk about how Indian classical dance, specifically Bharatanatyam, has shaped my own religious experience and spirituality. Growing up, my parents, after they came to the United States, immediately kind of put me in Bharatanatyam. They didn't have a lot of experience themselves in either Sangeetam or dance, but they were passionate about me wanting to stay in touch with my cultural roots. And they themselves were very passionate and excited to see me engaging in something which even they did not have the opportunity to experience themselves when they were in India. As the years went on, I was kind of like, okay, happy-go-lucky kid experiencing dance and just trying to learn the steps, seeing other Indian girls like myself taking part in this art form. I didn't really go a step beyond and think about how this informed my own sense of spirituality. But as the years went on, my family would celebrate different festivals at home. We would do pujas at home. And in our day-to-day life, my parents would speak about their belief in a higher power, in God. And it got me thinking about what I should be believing and thinking of. In Bharatanatyam, one of the things that I found really special with my guru was that she really emphasized the value of the theoretical component of Bharatanatyam. So it wasn't simply a physical skill or a physical talent. It was actually a practice and a spiritual one at that. The goal of the Indian arts broadly is to evoke rasa, or a sense of spiritual bliss, in the artist as well as in the spectator. Bharatanatyam has two main aspects to its dance presentation. One is natya, or the storytelling component, and the other is nritta, or the pure dance technique. So the natya portion is supposed to nurture some devotional feelings and some religious and spiritual contemplation, specifically by retelling the stories of the gods, the great Hindu epics, and the myths. When I have been in dance and when I have seen people perform, I really do feel this out-of-body experience that has been very, very special. And it really prompts me to think that there is some greater purpose behind the actual technique and skill of Bharatanatyam. I want to talk a little bit about the Natya Shastra. The Natya Shastra is a Sanskrit text that was actually written by this great sage called Bharata Muni. And it's actually dated back to between 200 BCE and 200 CE. So it's a very old, ancient text that we actually still use today. The text actually consists of like several different chapters with different poetic verses that describe the different performing arts. And they talk about drama, about singing, and about dance, the different makeup, the different costumes, the roles and the goals of the director, the artists themselves, and the integration of music with any artistic performance. So it's really almost like an encyclopedia, or like a treatise on dance and the arts. And it has since influenced these literary and musical traditions in India. I want to talk a little bit, though, about not just the to-do component, but actually about the kind of opinions it carries. And one is that the Natya Shastra, like other Hindu texts, actually asserts that the arts and music are spiritual, and that they have in themselves the power to guide oneself to moksha, or enlightenment, by empowering concentration of the mind for the liberation of the self. So the goal of the performing arts, as according to the Natya Shastra, is ultimately to let the spectator, as well as the artist, experience their own consciousness, that thoughtful, contemplative, spiritual contemplative process that we can then evaluate and then feel the values kind of inculcated within ourselves, and to ultimately rise to a higher level of consciousness. So it's not purely an aesthetic experience, but there is also a spiritual component to it. And I think it was actually through experiencing that out-of-body experience while I was dancing and seeing other people dance that made me more interested in the spiritual component of it, because I felt something and then wanted to understand, wow, you know, what is this that I'm feeling? I really do feel that there is a higher power here. And it was really special to be able to experience that through someone else, because you feel this sense of connection with them as well as with a higher being. Something that's really special is in Bharatanatyam, there are different shlokas that we say to invoke that sense of spirituality within ourselves before we start dancing in order to bring the right energy. And this is one that we say quite often. So I will say it right now and also share the translation. It is Yato hasta stato drishti. Where the hand is, the eyes follow. Yato drishti stato manaha. Where the eyes go, the mind follows. Yato manaha stato bhavaha. Where the mind is, there is feeling. And yato bhavaha stato rasaha. Where there is feeling, there is that flavor or that sweetness. And this goes back to the rasa theory that I mentioned about the Natya Shastra, with the ultimate goal of Indian classical dance and the performing arts to be to invoke the sense of rasa or spiritual contemplativeness within the artist and the viewer. So there are many subtleties that are expressed within the hand gestures. And along with the Natya Shastra, there are some texts that are even more specific to Bharatanatyam that go into all of the different mudras and all of the different ways you can use each mudra to depict a scene or an action. I wanted to talk a little bit more about what spirituality means to me. So I'll go ahead and do that now. When I was a little bit older, I began thinking about, you know, what makes Hinduism unique as compared to the other religions. And a couple of things that stood out is that in Hinduism, oftentimes we have a preference for one deity while not excluding or disbelieving in the others. So that is unique to Hinduism. And I feel that that notion is quite a special one, because in our day-to-day lives, we encounter people who have different preferences and different beliefs than ourselves. And being able to understand that tolerance and kindness is actually a core belief or a core tenet of Hinduism makes me feel like it's that much easier to practice, and it's actually welcomed in our day-to-day life. The next thing that makes Hinduism unique is the belief in karma, or the universal law of cause and effect. It's actually through this idea, it's not so much that I feel fearful of doing something wrong because of the repercussions, but I actually take a more optimistic approach and think, well, naturally, there are probably going to be consequences to not just our actions, but also our thoughts. So it's probably a good idea to keep that in mind and to believe that when we put good out into the world, that it will probably find its way back to us. The next thing that makes Hinduism unique is this belief in the possibility of liberation and release, like moksha or enlightenment, in which the endless cycle of birth and death and rebirth can kind of be resolved. There are, I think, some special ways of feeling like we can feel a little bit enlightened in our day-to-day lives. And for me, Bharatanatyam and that feeling of being taken over spiritually is a way of feeling a little bit of that enlightenment in kind of the cycle of day-to-day life. The next kind of thing I wanted to address is how my cultural upbringing and specifically learning dance has shaped me into who I am now. I was very lucky in that my mentors and role models within Bharatanatyam were also quite successful in their day-to-day lives. What I learned from Bharatanatyam is that even in different art forms, there's a lot of theory to it. Bharatanatyam is very special in that it has a very ancient precedent. It's literally thousands of years old, and there are texts such as the Natya Shastra, which are kind of indisputable evidence that this art form has existed. Next thing I want to talk about is how my cultural upbringing and learning from Bharatanatyam has shaped me into who I am now. So Bharatanatyam is obviously a very traditional art form that has survived with its basic form intact for literally centuries. I feel that it was very special to be able to do something that has been around for so long. In terms of how it has shaped me into who I am now, experiencing that transcendence when I dance is, I think, what prompted me to think about more what religion and spirituality meant to me. My role models within Bharatanatyam, how they kind of went about dance was very important. The Natya Shastra was a text that we followed, and then we also would methodically think about the theory component of Bharatanatyam. And for me, that was a lesson in discipline. So although this art form has existed for various centuries and people kind of choose to practice it in slightly different ways, we have to stay true to the crux of what's written in the Natya Shastra. That's what makes Bharatanatyam Bharatanatyam. And we can take some artistic liberty in perhaps depicting a piece that is socially relevant to today's day and age, but we also bear in mind that Bharatanatyam is a component of the nritya and the storytelling component, and we use mudras in their appropriate way in order to convey our message. So discipline is the number one thing that I have taken away from Indian classical dance, not just from daily or weekly or yearly practice, but staying true to the art form and understanding what makes Bharatanatyam Bharatanatyam and the things we can do to make it a little bit more unique and a little bit more fun, perhaps, for a specific event or a specific function, but staying true to the rules and the parameters set by the Natya Shastra. The other thing that I've learned from Indian classical dance is the appreciation of aesthetic beauty. Bharatanatyam is filled with these very geometric angles, and the body moves in kind of a very pleasing way. And there is value to that. I would say it's kind of underappreciated, but all of the bright colors that we see for the different festivals, Holi and Diwali, the makeup, the costumes, that's all a very important part of Bharatanatyam and the holidays in Indian culture. So how we present ourselves and how things appear are actually important and are a representation of not only ourselves, but of the things that we believe in. So the next question I want to address is, why is it important for the current generation Indian Americans to feel proud of their roots? Growing up in America, I've seen that many of us who have been either born here or raised here have different ways of thinking about our roots. I'm lucky in that I had a very positive experience getting to celebrate Indian culture and religion. We live close to several temples. I felt quite connected to my roots through dance. So I'm very privileged to have had that and to be able to live in a home where the conversations about what does God mean to you, Dad or Mom, were welcomed, and that we would be able to talk about them in a collaborative, friendly way. I feel that the role my parents have played has been really important because it has set the precedent for how I will choose to incorporate religion and spirituality in my day-to-day life. In addition to all of the holidays that we get to celebrate for fun, I also have dance, which in and of itself is a spiritual experience for me. I also think about what it is, like the values that I want to inculcate in my future children. And that also informs how I view religion now. For me, I would like my future children to know that tolerance is very important, but that we can also respect our own culture and our own upbringing, because hopefully the people around us are also practicing tolerance. For me, religion has been a way of holding on to faith and belief through thick and thin. So regardless of the outcomes and the manifestations of, the things that happen in our day-to-day lives, I would continue to choose to believe in God and to think about how I can be a better person each day. The other thing that I would want my future children to be able to gauge from spirituality is that it is possible to reinvent yourself and to kind of be better. We think, we are who we are, and perhaps it's easy to get stuck in a rut in our day-to-day. But through introspection and encouraging the inner dialogue with ourselves and knowing or feeling like we're being showered with positive energy allows us to not just to accept who we are, but also recognize that there's a capacity to change and to be better. And we can do that through prayer. We can do that through spending time with our family on the holidays. We can do that through pursuing an artistic endeavor like Bharatanatyam or Carnatic music. So that curiosity, the discipline, and the connection that I found through Indian classical dance and staying spiritual have all been very special to me. And I want to say thank you to everyone for allowing me to share my thoughts on how Bharatanatyam has shaped my sense of religion. Thank you.
ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः